so far, Riles.
I think I want to hear that thing. I want to hear it. My ears.
Well, you also
hurt in my ears.
get to pick the amp. We got a box.
Oh boy.
In today's world, true craftsmen are an endangered species, as society seems to have forgotten the importance of skilled labor. I'm determined to prove that the trades are in fact alive and well by finding the next generation of artisans, craftsmen, and trade workers that are doing their part to keep the phrase American made in this country's vocabulary. I'm Tay Whiteside, and this is Behind the Craft. Today, the crew and I find ourselves in the township of Vinton, Virginia, 15 minutes outside of downtown Roanoke, in the home shop of my good friend Wyatt Allen. Wyatt and I became friends through our mutual love of all things mechanical, and I always wanted to learn more about his skills as a custom guitar builder, or as it's known in the industry, a luthier.
My name is Everett Wyatt Allen. Most people call me Wyatt. Business name is Baul Instruments, B-A-U-L. And I've been building guitars since 2007, something like that, 2008. And it's the great addiction. It's a good addiction. A luthier is somebody who builds a lute. The old version of a guitar was called a lute. I think it stems from Italy, I do believe. Somebody who's building a guitar from scratch. So my family played bluegrass when I was a kid, and they started me off with different random instruments, different this, different that, and put a violin in my hands, and it's like, it just didn't feel right, to play different instruments, and finally they're like, we need a bass player, here's an upright boy. So they got me an upright bass, and it fit so well. The upright bass is just one of those instruments that you can fill in with any group, any band playing bass. You get the groove going on, and I latched on to a groove, to some deep pocket. Bluegrass, taught me a lot about fundamentals and theory and getting things right, tight and right, patience, but I needed more overall. But yeah.
Riley and Walker, the other two members of our production team, couldn't wait for Wyatt to start walking me through his guitar making process, as they have been musicians for most of their lives and couldn't do much to hide their excitement for these beautiful guitars.
It was either a music major or mechanical engineering, and I applied to Virginia Tech for mechanical engineering early and never heard back from them. Virginia Tech.
They did the same to me.
Yeah.
And the thing is, I didn't do a safety. I was like, I only applied to the engineering school with a 3.7 out of high school. Like, nah, dude.
And then the other one was apply for music at VCU, and VCU, they called me back, and I did an audition, and they were like, yeah, we want you, get in. So I got a bachelor's of music performance for upright bass from VCU. And so I've always been mechanical, and always been thinking about music in a mechanical way. And how can I manipulate the gears within music? How can I play a role and move something and push something and take something back and pull in many directions? It's always a mechanical, logical, left brain sort of mindset to music. I'm really good at backing people, and I'm really good at getting a band sounding right. My favorite roles to play in classical was a small ensemble, because there was a lot more scrutiny on me as a bass player. But I really enjoyed the hair standing on your back when I have to get this note perfect.
No safety net.
There's no safety net.
Right.
I love that.
What brought you from upright bass in a ensemble environment to like guitar in bars, restaurants, music venues, that kind of thing?
Well, you tend to be a broke musician. Somebody calls you up and says, I want to pay you some money to go play. And you're going to say, yeah. So I was in college and I took this class, Physics of Sound, and it really just started putting all these pieces together. I could take math and run through frequencies and understand music theory dedicated to frequencies. I can run the string and understand harmonics and how transfer of energy goes through different materials, and there's just the densities of wood and the densities of all these other little pieces, and then running and starting to understand how different scales are set up, equal temperament versus just intonation, you know, having frets and having all these little pieces, and then all of a sudden you look at a guitar and it's like, well, I understand why. I understand why they did this and why they did that. Let me take this Fender guitar and rip it apart and see, why did you build this? Oh my gosh. And then there's the industrial point of view of how to spit these instruments out in a good quality way where you could still alter them. It's fascinating to me to find the smallest little part and piece of a guitar, to question, what is the end result? What is the sound? How can I manipulate this for a musician to better say something beautiful on stage?
What kinds of things did you change?
So the biggest thing that I changed, so this is a typical Telecaster, Fender Telecaster body,
Okay.
right? And the biggest thing that I changed is the horn usually would go up to here. So in my playing style, I've got a very straight wrist, and so if I were to cut that horn off and lop off a good 1.5 inches, something like that,
You can slide up.
I can slide up and catch another fret without
Okay.
having to bend my hand out. This is
Right.
a regular Tele body.
But if I never saw this, I wouldn't look at this and think that there's anything out of place.
Yeah, it doesn't seem too out of the ordinary.
Which is kind of a win-win as far as a modification standpoint goes, right?
I think so. I've done some of them that are maple, popular, whatever I can get my hands on
Yeah.
to give a shot and see what these different woods, how they react to the routers, how they react to sanding, how they look, how they sound.
I was about to say, and ultimately how they play. I mean, different poplar and cherry are very different in hardness. That must affect the sound
Absolutely.
somehow, right?
Absolutely. More dense a wood is, the more actual vibration transfer you're going to get through that wood.
Okay, makes sense.
Yeah, so, but on the other hand,
Like sustain, basically, right?
a lot of times sustained. So, but if you have a softer wood, sometimes you won't get the clarity out of it because the wood almost soaks up some of the high end.
These are two of the biggest things too, neck, body, but you do electronics too, right?
Yeah,
Like that's,
yeah. I've wound quite a few pickups, messed up a whole lot of them. The pickup selection is crucial to what sound you want. Started with the pickups and the electronics and manipulating what kind of sound to get. And of course, you know, being broke, you can only afford but so much. So the big one was I wanted a guitar and I couldn't afford a decent guitar. So I ended up buying somebody's project. So I bought this guitar. It was a Fender Telecaster, and it was all in pieces and all in parts, and it was just like crappy this, crappy that, crappy that, but this is good and this is good. Well, I don't know why it's good, but I'm gonna give it a shot. So I started putting it together and buying parts and pieces, and I think it was like $250, I built a guitar that was worth a good $450, $500, and I loved it. So in today's industry, there's a few different ways that guitars are being made. There's a lot of them that are being made very well. Your Fender Squier series, like honestly, they're doing a really good job at taking a cheap guitar and putting some quality parts in it these days. I've been surprised, really surprised at how good some Fender Squiers are these days. There's been some Fender Squiers that are just terrible. and I can't believe you just can't adjust them without snapping the truss rods. Your tuners are terrible, your hardware is terrible, your pickups are terrible, your electronics are terrible, your paint is terrible, everything about it is just terrible. And if it's got a $100 price tag on it, yeah, it's only worth $100. It's, you know, probably not even worth that. If you go to a custom guy, somebody who's building something from scratch, there's so many avenues that you can go. So, for instance, having somebody who has the experience on the bench versus on stage can guide you to what you actually want. There's a stigma to say, like, you get a custom guitar made, oh my gosh, it's gonna cost you just thousands of dollars. Like, no, that's not necessarily true. What you're paying for is my experience on the bench to say, well, these parts will be good for you. So it's not always this massive expense. It can be if you want every little detail to be altered in a way that you can't buy something off the shelf.
Just because you can make full custom doesn't always mean that you should.
No, not at all. The bulk of when I make money with luthier work is usually repair work. So I enjoy doing old instrument repair to bring something that's messed up back into the world. I remember I had a mid-60s Gretsch, and the fingerboard was just like bowed like crazy. I had to rip the whole fingerboard and put a whole new fingerboard on it. But at the end of the day, that guitar is now back in the hands of the man that used to play that when he was a kid. And it was so much fun seeing the giggle in his face when he had his childhood guitar working again.
So it's not always about trying to sell someone on the biggest and best.
No.
You're more, what do you need?
Yeah.
And what do you have?
I take myself as a servant more than a salesman.
This guy builds stuff for a living.
Play, monkey. After seeing all the detail involved in Wyatt's guitar making process, it gave us a newfound appreciation for how a guitar makes sound and why playing one of his custom guitars feels as special as it does. It was at this point that production of the episode ground to a halt, as we all got carried away playing the different guitars Wyatt had made and forgot why we were even there in the first place. That being said, none of us, with the exception of Wyatt, were really able to put these beauties through their paces. But you know what? That didn't bother us at all, because we were having a great time. Dude, it all makes sense now.
Good.
Like, you can talk about the wood and the electronics and the assembly process and what it all in theory means, but once you start putting your fingers to strings and you hear the sound, it sort of amplifies, pun intended, the significance of what all goes into a guitar and how it hits you when it's done, you know? What's it feel like to see someone light up? Sort of hit that aha, like.
That's the best part. That is the best part. When they finally get what they need, their tool that they can craft, that they love, or something unique that they've been looking for a long time. The light on their faces is beautiful. There's a lot of humanism and happiness that goes along with helping people get what they actually need in an instrument and playing music and having that musical language with each other. It's beautiful. Yeah, people. It's beautiful. I geek out about the math and the physics, when really it's all about the people. So I feel like I'm really good at figuring out what people need versus what they want.
They don't know it.
Yeah. I mean, if somebody wants to give me a stupid amount of money to make them whatever they want, it doesn't mean they're going to be happy with it. So if you can get yourself to where you can build, you can manipulate, you can focus on the music as opposed to the instrument. I love that part. But if you can't, then you call me.
Dude, thank you, man.
Absolutely.
Try to get better at playing.
You do that.